Hello, hello. Welcome back to Asia Spot. It's that time of the month. We are going through every single book I read in July. But quick disclaimer, I am filming this on July 24, so we have a week to go. I've read 4 books so far, but I'm flying to Taiwan tomorrow, and I still haven't decided what books I'm bringing. So if, in case I finish more books by then, expect a second part to the filming, which will be at the end of this video. We have read 4 books so far. July was an interesting reading month. It is my birthday month, and I have been stressed and tired and exhausted and just... I started the month very strong. I think I finished 3 books in like a week and a half, and then work got in the way, and I haven't been reading in the past week. So we're at 4 books so far, and my current read, which is The Coin by Yasmin Zaher, has been great. Unfortunately, I don't have the time. Hopefully, the moment I get to Taiwan, I get to finally finish another book. But for now, let's go through the 4 that I've read so far. First book I read was All Fours by Miranda July, which was a pleasant surprise. It's so funny because every time I would post about this book on my book account on Instagram, there would be a deluge of comments of people just telling me how much they hated it or how much they loved it. And I remember when I posted my review, I said, unpopular opinion, I kind of really like it. People were like, why is that an unpopular opinion? You guys should check my DMs every time I post about this book. People really don't like this. But Miranda July is an author I've been wanting to read and explore more of ever since I watched this booktube videos of like 10 weirdest books you could possibly read. And Miranda July always comes up. And I've never read a book by her, so this was a nice entry into her writing. It was much less weird and disgusting as I expected, but I did love how she executed it. The thing with me with weird books is they need to be for a reason. They cannot be just purely for shock value. I always find that very lazy. One of my favorite authors that really captures weird and disgusting and just like dark, but for a purposeful way, in my opinion, is Dennis Cooper. That author terrifies me, but also I will eat his works up. But anyway, All Fours is a great introduction to Miranda July's writing because it is told from the perspective of it is told from a perspective in literature that is often underrepresented. It is told from the POV of a perspective in literature that is often underrepresented, which is middle-aged women going through a midlife crisis, trying to figure out their marriages, aging, being a mother, what it means to be a woman, and to have a blossoming sexual life and desires even when you are reaching an age that people consider to be old. The thing is, this book is not meant to be palatable. The protagonist is not meant to be palatable, and they are not. It is about a woman who is going through it. It is a midlife crisis in full action, which is largely influenced by the world that we are living in. And what fascinates me about this book is you get to see this protagonist who goes on this last-minute cross-country road trip from California to New York and then makes a last-minute decision to go on a bit of a side quest and really dive deep into this crisis that they're going through of figuring out their sexuality and desire and just their wants and needs as a woman going through aging. And you can see her trying to figure out how to make sense of a life, to go after what you want without totally upending it. You see her in this book try to push and push and push boundaries on the way we look at sexuality, desire, womanhood, marriages, and the many forms a life can take. It doesn't tell you that one is better than the other, but it just tells you that, hey, these are options. These are what's out there. And some of these you might roll your eyes at. Some you might be like, hey, you have a point. And I think Miranda July does an exceptional job in putting these in front of you and to make space for these uncomfortable questions and thoughts that I think other authors would end up writing carelessly about. And honestly, big props to her, because when you read the acknowledgement section of this book, you can really see the amount of research that she tried to do justice to the story that she's telling. But yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I love the opening part and the ending part of the book much more than the middle. It got a bit tedious for me at one point, but just overall on the themes that she's exploring, and it's a fun book to read. It's a fun, fascinating book to read, and I think I learned a lot from this reading experience. I recommend it. Although, again, it's Miranda July, so if you are not up for a graphic novel, maybe not for you. Next, we have my birthday weekend read, which was Brian by Jeremy Cooper. This was a last minute pick by me. I saw one of my friends on Bookstagram say how this is one of their favorite reads of the year so far, how it felt so heartwarming and wholesome and nice, and just like a love letter to cinema and community. And I do agree with a lot of those points, but I did also find it quite boring, which is an unfortunate case, because it is tender in a way that didn't resonate with me. It is about a man who is very comfortable and obsessed with their routine and not being dealt with surprises by life. They're trying to understand, how do I make connection but also not, disrupt the life that I'm living? And one of their ways of doing that is joining a community of film lovers in the British Film Institute. And through this, we get to see a story, a love letter to art and the community that is built around it, but also of this unremarkable soul trying to not necessarily find meaning in their life, but just something to do, something to spend time with, and just something to have something quote unquote more in your life. And I think if I read the blurb and what it stands for and its themes and what it left me with, and a lot of the film references that I loved and adored, it would have been rated higher. Unfortunately, the writing style itself just is a bit of a hard thing for me to look past. I believe I gave this book essentially around 3.5 stars. Love what it stands for. Love the bits, thoroughly loved the bits that I found in this book, especially when it comes to cinema and about community. But the writing style is very important to me, and unfortunately that one doesn't resonate. But I do think if you love cinema and you love community and books that nothing really happens, you can give this a try. The writing style is best experience for yourself, because I do love books where nothing really happens, but it does need to be executed quite well. So that is Brian by Jeremy Cooper. Next, we are heading to Norway with the next two books. We have Scenes from a Childhood by one of my favorite authors of all time, Mr. Jan Fosse. This was the last book I read before my life just became very, very stressful and exhausting and tiring. And it felt like a calm before the storm. I think that's how I love to describe Jan Fosse's writing. There's always something rhythmic and hypnotizing with the way he chooses his words and the way he tells his stories. Because it really feels like there's a meditative quality to the way that Jan Fosse writes his books. The way it makes me slow down, and for a moment in time, it feels like I can breathe, even just for a little bit. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should read another Jan Fosse right now, because I do need to breathe and slow down with how busy life has been. But I just wanted to give major props to Jan Fosse for being able to land that emotion with me consistently across the 3-4 books I've read by him. And just with the other Jan Fosse books I've read, this has his usual flavor. It's sparse, it's rhythmic, it's hypnotizing, and recursive. It kind of reminds me of the way some of my favorite movies are filed under slow cinema, like An Elephant Sitting Still, Drive My Car, where it's less about the plot and it's more about the feelings and how the atmosphere really contributes a lot to it. About the repetition, about the silences, how when there is nothing said doesn't automatically mean that there's nothing shared. And this one specifically, Scenes from a Childhood, is a short story collection, the title being one of the short stories that is in this novel. About the favorite themes that Jan Fosse loves to explore, about memory and growing up and everything that life becomes through that process. And the funny thing is, the moment I finished this book, I started looking up reviews because I wanted to see what other people thought. And the most famous short story from this book is titled, "And Then My Dog Will Come Back to Me." Yeah, "And Then My Dog Will Come Back to Me," which is a little bit of a novella, a bit of a thriller-esque novella written through Jan Fosse's usual style of writing that really progresses as the story goes. The novella itself starts off with a dog being killed and the owner of the dog wanting to kill the killer of the dog. And it becomes very hypnotic and dreamlike, and there's a sense of urgency across every single word that you read, and there's a play on memory and self-denial and just absolutely wonderful way of injecting what is Jan Fosse's style of writing into a genre that is quite different from his usual calm and collected and chill narratives. This one is a lot more haunting and thriller-esque, I would say. But the more interesting thing to me is my favorite short story here is actually the title collection, which I saw some mixed reviews when I was reading people's thoughts on it. But there's a way that Jan Fosse is able to go back in time and paint a picture for its readers. Because the way Jan Fosse writes scenes from a childhood, he looks back at memory and he doesn't write it in a linear way, but something a lot more atmospheric and flows in many different ways, and something just randomly comes up to you. And some of them are drenched in meaning, but some of them are also just mere observations, and both of them are equally as important as the other. In his refusal to dictate to the reader what's important and what's not, what's an observation and what has a deeper meaning, and leaving it to the reader to just have that trust on the reader to make their own conclusion is something I always appreciate from the authors. Please do not over-explain. And I don't know, I think that just makes his works very emotionally resonant and beautiful in my perspective. But yes, I absolutely adore Jan Fosse. I think every single book I read by him, I just get more and more and more in love. And one of his most famous books, aside from Septology, which is Melancholy 1 and 2, is a book I've been postponing for a while because I just want to read it in the perfect moment. I might save it for winter, so. And last but not the least, a book that I should have finished in like 1 to 2 days, but took me a whole week and a half because of, I'm going to stop saying it, I've been tired, is Back in the Day by Oliver Lavrensky, which it was recommended to me by my Norwegian friend. And this, I really hate how my reading experience for this one panned out, because the days that I got to read this in one sitting, like chunks of the book, maybe 80 pages in one sitting, were incredible reading experiences. But during days when I didn't have the time to really sit down with it, I read it on the train, maybe like 5 pages, 10 pages, I struggled to gain momentum and enjoy the book as much as I think I could have. And that is not the book's fault. That is my reading experiences. But Back in the Day by Oliver Lavrensky is about a group of working class migrant kids in Oslo, a city that is often known for its peace and order and just one of the happiest cities in the world. And then you get to see lives that are in the margins, grew up in the streets, who are never really taught what's right or wrong, and by the time it is taught to them, it becomes a little bit too late, and you try and hope that the mistakes and decisions they make when they are young, when they weren't really properly brought up in a system that doesn't take care of them, that these decisions won't ruin their lives. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And I don't know, it's a beautiful, heartbreaking story that still has glimpses of hope. But I think what I like the most about Back in the Day by Oliver Lavrensky is these Norwegian authors and the way they challenge the novel form. Jan Fosse with the way he writes in big chunks, sometimes he avoids punctuations or he just loves to use repetition. And then Back in the Day by Oliver Lavrensky, how the use of informal writing, you can see it's like kind of like journal entries. He uses a lot of informal writing, improper grammar, and then uses a lot of loan words or slang that are heavily used, at least for them growing up in Oslo, is something you would think would be a hard reading experience, but it wasn't. It added to the flavor of the book. It added to the reading experience. It made the narrative of the book land so much stronger because you're reading words in the way that they are being said and being experienced, and you're reading all of these lives that are so intertwined with one another, not only with one another, but also with their language use. And Oliver Lavrensky did a wonderful job at that. Even though I did have to use Google for a lot of my translations for this book, I have zero regrets, and I think it was such an effectively done novel, which I wish I could have finished in 1 to 2 days, or at least in big bursts, instead of the middle chunk of this book, which I had to read across many days. But yes, this is a beautiful book about friendship and the people that you would lay your life down for. There's violence here, there's a lot of it, a lot of bad mistakes. And yet you still hope for better. You still hope for better. That's all I can think of. Because the violence here is not gratuitous. It is structural and social and tied to the way they grew up and the society that they were brought up to the backdrop of. Does that make sense? And beneath all that violence and rage, there is so much love together with urgency to the lives of these kids as you try to look back at their lives back in the day. And at the end of the day, there is still hope as you read this book. You see them try to come up hope. You see them try to come up with hope in situations where it becomes very, very difficult. It kind of makes it hurt a lot more when you look at it from that perspective, but sometimes that's all you can go for. And it's the same kind of hope that clings to the people that you love, even when it's not rational. And I think Oliver Lavrensky, did a wonderful job in writing that into this novel. But yes, that is the 4 books I've read this July so far. I'll leave it to future SJ to decide if this is the end of the video or we finished more books this July. And I'm hoping we did. Because I am itching to read a lot more books. My mind has been quite foggy these last 2 weeks and just tired and exhausted. And I think a good book is going to help me out a little bit, you know? Hi, hello. We are now in Taipei, and I finished 2 additional books that I will talk to you about. This is not the book. The first book is inside my bag, but I'm currently reading this one, which I'll also quickly share about. And if the camera quality looks a bit different, I may have gotten a vlogging camera. So stay tuned for my Taipei videos and Taiwan videos, but I'm also still learning how to use it, so bear with me. First book we have is The Coin by Yasmin Zaher, which I started sometime last week and I only finished it during my flight on the way to Taiwan. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it because I'm not entirely sure I would have finished that book if it weren't for me being on a 4-hour-long flight. Because on the one hand, the themes it explores of contradictions, the performance of success, hunger, and just how complicated it is to be a human being and the things that we want and what we do, but then we also contradict ourselves is very, very fascinating to me. But it's still something that I'm trying to understand did the book do it properly? Like, did it tie everything together? That I'm not entirely sure about. Right now it's lingering on my mind at maybe 3.5, 3.25 stars. And in The Coin by Yasmin Zaher, a Palestinian woman, a wealthy Palestinian woman, is trying to build a life in the US. She teaches underprivileged kids in the morning, and then at one point in the book, she starts a pyramid scheme to sell Birkin bags with this homeless man that she meets that gives off that vibe of being wealthy despite not really having anything. And this is not a spoiler, this is on the back of the book. And then as you go through the story, you start seeing the contradictions of the things that she carries, her own Birkin bag, the name brands that she would wear, but also her own struggles with trying to
fit into the US. You see her observations of the homeless people, the poor people, and the rich. And this becomes such an integral part of the book, and the metaphors are aplenty as you're reading this. She doesn't try to hide it. It becomes a very, as you go through the book, it becomes more and more apparent the things that she's talking about. But my issue with the book is there's plenty of wonderful, brilliant moments in it that makes you think about the illusion of wealth, about trying to fit into a new society, about the performance of success. And then towards the end, it becomes a lot more and more existential that personally I'm not entirely sure worked out very, very well, in my opinion. So that's The Coin by Yasmin Zahir, and I'm so sad because I was really, really looking forward to this. I thought it was going to be a potential 5-star read for me. And you know I love a weird book, but this one was weird. Didn't work too well for me. That's The Coin by Yasmin Zahir. Next book we have is For Art and for Life by Vincent van Gogh. I have a comb inside. And I got this because I was really admiring the covers of the Penguin Archives edition. And they're absolutely stunning, especially this one by Van Gogh. I know it's supposed to reflect like the art style of the time it was published in, so that's a very interesting tidbit, at least for me. For Art and for Life is exchanges of letters from Vincent van Gogh to the people around him, but especially Theo, which is his well-known favorite brother. Like it's not a secret that Theo is his favorite brother. And it's fascinating because I went into this the same way I went to Letters to a Young Poet, which is I wanted to learn from a mind that is considered to be one of the greats today, which in Vincent van Gogh's lens also holds a contradiction because we do know how he struggled late in his life with his mental illnesses, etc. And you get to see that here. You get to see a man, a big dreamer, a person who really dedicates his life to art. And there's so many bits and pieces of brilliance, and you know that this man was meant for greatness. But what's special about this book is you also get to see the descent into what becomes a much, much harder life. Vincent van Gogh died quite young. I think he was in his early 30s. And there's a timetable of the key events in his life, which put into perspective each letter, when they were written, when he was a lot more hopeful, when his body starts to give out, and then once his mind starts to go away. And it's absolutely stunning because for the short length it is, and the letters are not always the most interesting. Sometimes they're just sometimes they're just rambling, but for some reason it feels nice to be like peeking into. And I think that the title is a very accurate way. I think is the most appropriate title you could give to this book, that a person such as Vincent van Gogh, who dedicated his life to painting and is one of the greatest artists of our time, really gave everything for Art and for Life. I think I gave this book, I think four stars. There are many parts of this that I absolutely adored, but also some parts that I was just going through the motions of reading them. And then towards the end, what I was expecting to be a read that was going to be about learning from a great, and just hearing how their words flow from their mind, becomes more of a narrative as well on his hardships and what led him to the things that he did and how his life transpired, that we all know today, his situation with the ear and how he died. You get to not really see what happens, but you get to see what surrounds it, or what was in Van Gogh's frame of mind during that time, which is a very interesting way of looking at it, because you're not seeing the act, you're seeing the thoughts being written surrounding what is happening in his life. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense. Think about it this way. We know the key events in Van Gogh's life, but we don't see that. What we see is him writing letters surrounding this period of his life, which is a very, very tumultuous period of his life, and that's such a fascinating way of, I think, looking at it. That's not really how this was written. This is just a compilation of letters, but it was an interesting perspective that I had as a reader. So that is Vincent van Gogh's For Art and for Life. Very thin book, easy to read, very fascinating to see the mind of one of our greats. So that is everything I read. This July we had, I think, 6 books. It is currently July 30, so I technically still have one more day. I don't think I'll be able to finish this, but I wanted to just give you a quick glimpse of what will be on the next wrap-up, which is Not So the Desolate Man by Chu Tian-wen is my current read, and I'm already halfway through, and I just found out that this author is also the screenwriter of a lot of my favorite Taiwanese movies, which is such a fascinating thing to me because I did not expect her to be a woman, because this book is about gay men. Interesting. It's giving Hanya Yanagihara. But I will not give my full thoughts on it yet, but I do enjoy the exploration of gay life in Taiwan and their thoughts and their feelings. There's a lot of very academic references that happen, or just pop culture references that happen, that they really deep dive on, and I'm still trying to see how I feel about it, but so far so good. We're halfway through. I've just been very busy with work these past 2 days, so that's my current read. There you have it, our July reading wrap-up. I did not really think I would be able to finish this video because I thought I would be so busy, but I was able to sneak in time, and I wanted to be diligent about these reading wrap-ups because it's a nice way to reflect back on my life when I'm growing and old, and I will have these videos to just like, hey, I remember that book. But anyway, I'm currently in Taipei. Work starts in around 15 minutes, so I will get ready, look for a cafe, and I'll see you back at our usual spot.